Professor Zyxthala's tentacles trembled as she accessed the holographic display, her bioluminescent patches flickering nervously. The advanced theoretical physics classroom fell silent, save for the gentle hum of atmospheric processors and the occasional wheeze from the Matherian student in the back row. Today's lesson covered the infamous void resonance paradox, a mathematical nightmare that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for over a millennium. As you can see, Professor Zyxthala began, her voice wavering slightly through the universal translator. The void resonance equations break down completely when applied to dark matter interactions near galactic cores. Every civilization has attempted to solve this, from the crystal minds of Xerion Prime to the quantum computers of the Synthesis Collective. None have succeeded. The assembled students, representing dozens of species from across the galactic community, nodded in understanding. All except one. Marcus Chen sat in the middle row, absently chewing on a nutrient bar that would have been toxic to half his classmates. The human exchange student had arrived at Galactic University 3 months ago from Earth, that infamous Deathworld orbiting a yellow star in the galaxy's outer spiral arm. Most professors had been skeptical about accepting a student from such a violent, chaotic planet, but the Terran Federation's credits were good, and diversity quotas needed to be met. The fundamental issue, Professor Zyxthala continued, her confidence returning as she delved into familiar territory, lies in the quantum interference patterns. When dark matter particles interact with conventional matter at velocities approaching. "Excuse me, Professor," Marcus interrupted, raising his hand. Several students' breathing apparatus wheezed in surprise at the interruption. Professor Zyxthala's eyestalk swiveled toward him with barely concealed irritation. "Yes, Mr. Chen. I think there's an error in your base assumptions." Marcus stood up, pulling out a battered tablet covered in what looked like primitive chemical symbols. "You're treating the dark matter as a uniform field, but what if it's not? What if it exists in discrete probability clusters? A collective intake of breath, or gas, or filtered nutrients, rippled through the classroom." Professor Zyxthala's patches dimmed to an alarmed purple. "Mr. Chen, this problem has been examined by—" "Yeah, I know, really smart people." Marcus was already walking toward the holographic display, completely oblivious to the growing panic in his professor's posture. But they were all thinking about it wrong. "Look, on Earth we have these things called hurricanes, massive storm systems that look chaotic but actually follow predictable patterns." He began manipulating the holographic equations with casual confidence, his fingers dancing through three-dimensional mathematical constructs that had confounded civilizations for centuries. If you apply hurricane dynamics to dark matter distribution, treating each galactic core as an eye of the storm, the equations began to shift, realigning themselves in ways that seemed impossible. Professor Zyxthala watched in growing horror as Marcus casually rewrote fundamental constants, applied what appeared to be primitive meteorological principles to quantum physics, and somehow made it all work. "There," Marcus said, stepping back with satisfaction. "The resonance cascade doesn't break down, it just changes frequency based on the dark matter's rotational momentum. Pretty simple, really." The classroom was dead silent. Professor Zyxthala's tentacles had gone completely limp, her bioluminescent patches flickering erratically between colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum. The crystalline student in the front row was producing a high-pitched whine that suggested imminent mental fracture. That's impossible," Professor Zyxthala whispered. "The Xerion Prime Quantum Collective spent 3 centuries on this problem. The mathematics can't. "Oh, the math checks out," Marcus said cheerfully, returning to his seat. "I ran it through my calculator last night. Took about 20 minutes." Professor Zyxthala frantically began running diagnostic checks on the holographic display, certain that the human must have somehow corrupted the system. But every analysis confirmed the same impossible truth: the equations were correct. Not only correct, but elegant in their simplicity. Within minutes, emergency alerts were pinging across the galaxy. The solution was already being transmitted to the Galactic Physics Council, the Void Research Institute, and the high computational minds of the Andromedas cluster. 1,000 years of stalled research, breakthrough technologies that had seemed impossible, entire fields of study that could now advance, all because a Deathworlder had compared dark matter to weather patterns. Marcus packed up his tablet, seemingly unaware that he had just triggered the greatest scientific revolution in galactic history. As he headed for the door, he paused and looked back at his still paralyzed professor. "Same time Thursday, right? I've got some ideas about that whole faster-than-light communication problem you mentioned. I think it's just an issue with signal timing, kind of like coordinating wireless networks back home." Professor Zyxthala's patches went completely dark as Marcus left the classroom, whistling an ancient Earth tune that sounded disturbingly like a funeral dirge to most galactic species. Somewhere in the depths of space, ancient monitoring stations registered the first successful test of void resonance manipulation in over a millennium, their automated systems finally able to calculate.